Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Endeavour, watching the alien world grow larger through the main screen. The planet below looked like a jewel floating in space, with purple oceans and golden continents. Crystal towers rose from the surface, reaching toward the stars like fingers made of light. "First time seeing a Zephyrian world, Captain?" asked Commander Lisa Harper, his second in command. Jake nodded. "It's beautiful. Hard to believe they think we're nothing more than space barbarians." The Zephyrians had been traveling between stars for thousands of years before humans even learned to fly. Their technology was so advanced that their cities floated in the air, powered by energy sources that human scientists could barely understand. They ruled over dozens of worlds and considered themselves the most civilized species in the galaxy. "Incoming. Message from the planet's surface," reported Lieutenant Tom Brady from the communications station. "They're ready to receive our delegation." Jake straightened his uniform and checked his appearance one last time. This trade mission was important for humanity. Earth needed the rare minerals that Zephyrian worlds produced, and the Zephyrians wanted human food products that apparently tasted like nothing else in the galaxy. It should have been a simple exchange. The transport ship carried Jake and his diplomatic team down to the planet's surface. As they flew between the floating crystal spires, Jake could see Zephyrians moving along transparent walkways that connected the towers. The aliens were tall and thin, with skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Their eyes were large and dark, and they moved with a grace that made humans look clumsy by comparison. The royal palace sat at the center of the floating city. It was made entirely of blue crystal that seemed to glow from within. Guards in silver armor stood at attention as the human delegation was led through halls filled with art and technology that hurt to look at directly. King Valorian III waited for them in his throne room. The king was even taller than most Zephyrians, wearing robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. His crown floated above his head without any visible support, rotating slowly and casting rainbow patterns on the walls. "So," the king said, his voice echoing strangely in the crystal chamber, "the humans have come to beg for our resources." Jake kept his expression neutral. "We come to offer trade, Your Majesty. Our food products for your minerals. Both our peoples would benefit." The king laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Benefit? What could primitive creatures like humans possibly offer us that we cannot create ourselves?" Several Zephyrian nobles stood around the throne, and they joined in the king's laughter. Their amusement was cold and cruel, making Jake's jaw tighten. But he had dealt with difficult negotiations before. "Our agricultural techniques produce flavors that are unique in the galaxy," Jake said calmly. "Your own people have said that human food is unlike anything they have ever tasted." "Yes," the king admitted. "Your crude farming methods do create interesting chemical combinations. But the price you ask is too high. We can synthesize similar compounds in our laboratories." The negotiations continued for hours. Every offer Jake made was rejected with increasing disdain. The Zephyrian nobles whispered among themselves, making comments that Jake's translator couldn't quite catch, but which clearly weren't flattering. Finally, the king leaned back in his throne and seemed to study Jake with his large, dark eyes. "You know, Captain Morrison, I have been thinking about your people's situation. You are so far from home, so desperate for our help. Perhaps there is another way we could arrange this trade." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean, Your Majesty?" "I have a daughter," the king said, and the nobles around him suddenly went very quiet. "My youngest child, Princess Liana. She has brought shame upon our family and cannot be married to any respectable Zephyrian." "But perhaps a human might find her acceptable." The silence in the throne room was complete. Jake could hear his own heartbeat as he tried to process what the king was suggesting. "You want to arrange a marriage?" Jake asked carefully. "Indeed," the king said, and now his voice carried a cruel satisfaction. "My disgraced daughter for your trade agreement. It would solve both our problems, would it not?" The Zephyrian nobles began to laugh again, but this time their amusement was even more vicious. Jake realized that this was meant to be the ultimate insult. The king was offering his worthless, disgraced daughter to a primitive human, expecting Jake to refuse and give them an excuse to end the negotiations entirely. "What did the princes do to bring shame upon your family?" Jake asked. King Valorian's expression darkened. "She was caught researching forbidden technologies. Ancient devices that our ancestors declared too dangerous to study. She defied our laws and our traditions for her foolish curiosity." Jake nodded slowly. "A scientist, then. Someone curious enough to risk everything for knowledge. That didn't sound like something to be ashamed of to him." "I would like to meet Princess Lyanna before I give you an answer," Jake said. The laughter died instantly. The king's eyes widened in surprise, and the nobles looked at each other in confusion. "You would actually consider this?" the king asked. "A marriage is a serious matter," Jake replied. "I should meet the person you're suggesting I marry." The king stared at him for a long moment, then gestured to one of his guards. "Bring the princess here." While they waited, Jake could feel the tension in the room growing. The nobles whispered more urgently among themselves, and the king's expression had shifted from cruel amusement to something that might have been concern. Princess Lyanna entered the throne room a few minutes later, flanked by 2 guards. She was shorter than the other Zephyrians, with the same shimmering skin and large eyes, but there was something different about her. Where the others carried themselves with proud arrogance, she moved with quiet dignity. Her clothes were simpler than the elaborate robes worn by the nobles, but they were clean and well-maintained. "Father," she said, bowing slightly to the king. Her voice was soft but clear. "My daughter," the king said, "this human captain is considering my offer. He wishes to speak with you." Princess Lyanna turned to look at Jake, and he saw intelligence burning in her dark eyes. There was pain there too, and loneliness, but also a strength that reminded him of the best officers he had served with. "Princess," Jake said, stepping forward and bowing in the human style, "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the USS Endeavor. Would you be willing to speak with me privately?" She glanced at her father, who nodded impatiently. "Very well, but make it quick. I have other matters to attend to." Jake and the princes walked to a small alcove off the main throne room. The crystal walls gave them some privacy while still allowing the king to see them. "You don't have to do this," Princess Lyanna said quietly. "I know what my father is trying to do. He wants to insult you by offering his worthless daughter. You can refuse without shame?" Jake studied her face. "What was this forbidden research you were doing?" A spark of passion flickered in her eyes. "I found references to power sources that our ancestors used long ago. Energy systems that could power entire star systems with a single device. But the knowledge was sealed away, declared too dangerous for modern Zephyrians to study." "Why too dangerous?" "Because it might prove that our ancestors were not as wise as we pretend they were," she said bitterly. "Because it might show that there are things in the universe that we don't understand. Our people prefer to believe we are the pinnacle of evolution, that we have nothing left to learn." Jake smiled. "You sound like a scientist. I was before my disgrace." "Princess," Jake said seriously, "if I accept this arrangement, what would you expect from the marriage?" She looked surprised by the question. I don't know. I never thought anyone would actually consider it. I suppose I would expect to be ignored and forgotten, like I am here." "That's not how I treat my crew," Jake said, "and it's not how I would treat my wife." Princess Lyanna stared at him for a long moment. "You're serious about this?" "I am. But why? You don't know me. I'm a disgrace to my people." Jake looked back toward the throne room, where the king and nobles were watching them with barely concealed anticipation. "Because I think your people are wrong about a lot of things, including what makes someone valuable." They returned to the throne room, and every eye turned to them. The king leaned forward on his throne. "Well, Captain, have you made your decision?" Jake took a deep breath. "I accept your offer, Your Majesty. I will marry Princess Lyanna." The silence that followed was deafening. Then the nobles began to laugh again, but this time their laughter had a note of hysteria in it. They had expected the primitive human to refuse, to storm out in anger. Instead, he had called their bluff, King Valorian's expression was unreadable. You are certain of this decision? I am, the king nodded slowly. Then let the ceremony be prepared. Princess Lyanna will become your wife, and our trade agreement will be sealed. As the nobles continued their nervous laughter, Jake caught Princess Lyanna's eye. She was looking at him with something that might have been hope. Neither of them knew that this moment would change the course of galactic history. They only knew that sometimes the most important decisions were made not with the head, but with the heart. The wedding ceremony was the coldest event Jake Morrison had ever attended. It took place in a small chamber adjacent to the throne room, with only a handful of witnesses present. King Valorian stood at the front wearing his ceremonial robes, but his expression showed no joy or celebration. The few nobles who attended whispered among themselves, their voices carrying the sharp edge of mockery. Princess Lyanna wore a simple, white dress that seemed to glow softly in the crystal chamber's light. She kept her eyes downcast throughout. The brief ceremony, her hands folded in front of her. Jake stood beside her in his dress uniform. Feeling the weight of every stare in the room, the Zephyrian marriage ritual was unlike anything Jake had seen before. The king spoke words in the ancient Zephyrian language while a floating crystal above them pulsed with different colors. When it was time for the vows, both Jake and Lyanna had to place their hands on the crystal. It grew warm under their touch and began to sing with a sound like distant music. By the light of our ancestors and the power of the eternal crystals, I bind these two souls in marriage, King Valorian said, his voice echoing in the chamber. May their union bring benefit to both their peoples. The ceremony ended with polite applause that felt more like a funeral than a celebration. No one came forward to congratulate them or wish them well. The nobles filed out of the chamber quickly, already discussing other matters as if the wedding had been nothing more than a minor interruption to their day. King Valorian approached Jake and Lyanna as they stood together near the crystal altar. The trade agreement will be finalized tomorrow, he said to Jake. Your ship may depart once the paperwork is complete. Thank you, Your Majesty, Jake replied. The king turned to his daughter. Lyanna, you have 1 hour to gather your belongings. A servant will help you pack. Princess Lyanna nodded without looking up. Yes, father. And Lyanna, the king added, his voice softer than before, I hope you will find happiness among the humans. She looked up at him then, surprise flickering in her dark eyes. Thank you, father. An hour later, Jake found himself waiting in the palace's main hall as Princess Lyanna said goodbye to her family. She carried only a small bag and a metal case that she held carefully in her arms. Her brother, Prince Darius, was the only family member who seemed genuinely sad to see her go. Take care of yourself, sister, Prince Darius said, embracing her gently. And remember that not all Zephyrians think you brought shame upon our family. I will remember, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The journey back to the USS Endeavor was quiet. Jake and Lyanna sat together in the transport ship, but neither spoke. Jake wasn't sure what to say to his new wife, and she seemed lost in her own thoughts. The only sound was the gentle hum of the ship's engines as they flew toward the human vessel waiting in orbit. Commander Lisa Harper was waiting for them when they arrived at the Endeavor. She had done her best to prepare the crew for their captain's new wife, but Jake could see the uncertainty in her eyes. None of them had ever dealt with an alien crew member before, especially one who was also their captain's wife. Welcome aboard the USS Endeavor, Your Highness, Lisa said, offering a formal bow. Please just call me Lyanna, the princess replied. I'm no longer a princess. I'm just Jake's wife now. Jake showed Lyanna to his quarters, which would now be their shared living space. The room was larger than most crew quarters, but still small by royal standards. It had a bed, a desk, a small sitting area, and a private bathroom. Jake had moved some of his belongings to make room for her things. It's not much compared to what you used to, Jake said, feeling awkward. Lyanna set down her bag and looked around the room. It's perfect, she said, and Jake was surprised to hear that she meant it. I haven't had a space that was truly mine for months. What's in the case? Jake asked, nodding toward the metal container she still held. My research. Notes, she said, clutching it tighter. Everything I discovered about the ancient power sources. It's all I was allowed to take with me, Jake nodded. Would you like to rest, or would you prefer to see the ship? I would like to see the ship, if that's acceptable. Jake gave her a tour of the USS Endeavour, starting with the bridge and working their way through the various decks. The crew they encountered was polite but distant, unsure how to interact with their captain's alien wife. Liana seemed to understand their hesitation and didn't push for conversation. In the engineering section, Chief Engineer Pete Williams was working on one of the power distribution systems. He looked up as Jake and Liana approached, wiping his hands on a rag. Pete, I'd like you to meet my wife, Liana, Jake said. Pete nodded respectfully. Ma'am, welcome aboard. Liana moved closer to examine the power systems, her scientific curiosity overcoming her shyness. This is fascinating, she said, studying the energy conduits that ran along the walls. Your technology is so different from ours. Different? How? Pete asked, his wariness giving way to professional interest. Zephyrian technology is based on crystal matrices that focus and amplify energy, Liana explained. But your systems use direct energy conversion and distribution. It's much more efficient for smaller applications. Pete's eyes lit up. You understand engineering? I was studying energy systems before my disgrace, Liana said quietly. What kind of energy systems? Jake asked. Liana hesitated, then opened her metal case. Inside were dozens of data crystals and handwritten notes. Ancient Zephyrian power cores. They were designed to provide enormous amounts of energy with minimal fuel consumption. But the knowledge was lost centuries ago. Pete leaned closer to look at the crystals. These look like they might be compatible with our data systems. Would you mind if I took a look? You would be interested in my research? Liana asked, surprise evident in her voice. Are you kidding? Energy efficiency is every engineer's dream. If you've got information about advanced power systems, I'd love to learn about them. For the first time since Jake had met her, Princess Liana smiled. It transformed her entire face, making her look younger and more alive. I would be honored to share my research with you. Over the following days, as the USS Endeavour traveled back toward human space, Jake watched his new wife begin to come alive. She spent hours in the engineering section, working with Pete and his team to understand human technology. Her knowledge of Zephyrian power systems proved invaluable, and she began to see connections between the two different approaches to energy generation. Look at this, she said to Jake one evening as they ate dinner in their quarters. She had spread her notes across the table, mixing Zephyrian data crystals with human technical manuals. Your fusion reactors and our crystal matrices are solving the same problem in different ways. Jake studied the diagram she had drawn. I'm not following. Energy conversion, she explained, her eyes bright with excitement. Both systems take raw energy and convert it into usable power. But they use completely different methods. If we could combine them, what would happen? The efficiency would be incredible. We could power a ship this size with a fraction of the fuel it currently uses. Jake set down his fork. You're talking about a revolution in space travel. More than that, Liana said. This could change everything. Transportation, planetary power grids, even terraforming systems. The applications are endless. As the days passed, Jake found himself spending more and more time with Liana, not just as her husband, but as her research partner. His background in engineering helped him understand the practical applications of her theoretical work. They began to develop a partnership that went beyond their arranged marriage. You know, Jake said one evening as they worked late in their quarters, I think your father made a mistake when he called you disgraced. Liana looked up from her notes. What do you mean? You're not disgraced, you're brilliant. Your people just couldn't see it. She was quiet for a long moment. Do you really think so? I know so. What you're discovering here could benefit both our species. That's not disgrace, that's genius. Your crew seems to think so too, she said softly. They've been very kind to me, it was true. The crew's initial wariness had gradually given way to respect and even affection. Liana's genuine interest in their work and her willingness to share her knowledge had won them over. She had become not just their captain's wife, but a valued member of the team. "They see what I see," Jake said. "Someone worth knowing." "Jake," she said, her voice hesitant, "I want you to know that I'm grateful for what you did. Not just marrying me, but giving me a chance to be myself again." "You don't need to thank me for that." "Yes, I do. On my world, I was nothing but a source of shame. Here, I feel like I matter again." Jake reached across the table and took her hand. "You do matter. To me, to the crew, and to the future of both our peoples." As the USS Endeavour continued its journey toward human space, Jake realized that his arranged marriage was becoming something much more meaningful. He and Liana were building a partnership based on mutual respect, shared interests, and growing affection. What had started as a political arrangement was becoming a real relationship. Neither of them knew that their work would soon attract attention from across the galaxy. They were simply two people from different worlds, learning to trust each other and discovering that their differences could become their greatest strength. The USS Endeavour arrived at New Terra 3 weeks after leaving the Zephyrian homeworld. New Terra was one of humanity's newest colonies, a green world with vast oceans and 2 small moons. The planet served as both a research station and a testing ground for new technologies. Jake had requested permission to stop there so that Liana could work with human scientists on her research. Dr. Amy Chin met them at the orbital station that circled New Terra. She was the head of the colony's research division, a small woman with sharp eyes and an eager smile. She had been excited about the chance to work with Zephyrian technology ever since Jake had sent word of what they had discovered. "Captain Morrison, Princess Liana," Dr. Chun said as they stepped off the transport shuttle. "Welcome to New Terra. I've been looking forward to this meeting for weeks." "Thank you for agreeing to help us," Liana replied. "I hope our research will prove useful." Dr. Chun led them through the station to a conference room where several other scientists were waiting. Jake recognized Dr. Mark Thompson, a fusion specialist, and Dr. Sarah Kim, who worked with exotic materials. There were also technicians and engineers from various departments. "We've prepared a full laboratory for your use," Dr. Chun explained as they sat down around a large table. "We have fabrication equipment, testing chambers, and computer systems that should be compatible with your data crystals." Liana opened her research case and began placing the Zephyrian data crystals on the table. "These contain everything I discovered about the ancient power cores. But I must warn you, some of this information contradicts what my people believe about our own history." "What do you mean?" Dr. Thompson asked. "The power cores I found were not created by the Zephyrians," Liana said quietly. "They were created by an even older civilization. My people simply learned to use them without understanding how they worked." The room fell silent. Jake could see the surprise on the faces of the human scientists. They had assumed that the Zephyrians were the original creators of their advanced technology. "Who built them?" Dr. Chun asked. "I don't know," Liana admitted. "The records are incomplete. But I believe this ancient civilization had technology that was far more advanced than anything we see today. They understood principles of energy manipulation that both humans and Zephyrians are only beginning to discover." Dr. Kim leaned forward. "You said this contradicts Zephyrian beliefs?" "My people believe we are the pinnacle of galactic civilization," Liana explained. "We teach that our ancestors were the first to master space travel and energy manipulation. To suggest that we learned these things from someone else is considered heresy." "But you kept researching anyway," Jake said. "Because the truth is more important than comfortable lies," Liana replied, meeting his eyes. "And because I discovered something that could change everything." Over the next several days, the research team worked around the clock to understand the information in Liana's crystals. They built testing chambers and tried to recreate the ancient power cores using both human and Zephyrian technology. The work was slow and difficult, but gradually they began to see patterns. "Look at this," Dr. Chun said on the 4th day, calling everyone to gather around her workstation. "The power core design uses principles that are similar to human fusion technology, but the energy is focused through crystalline matrices like the Zephyrians use. It's a hybrid approach, Dr. Thompson added, taking the best of both methods and combining them. Liana studied the data on the screen. That's exactly what I thought. The ancient civilization must have understood both approaches and found a way to make them work together. But here's the interesting part, Dr. Kim said, bringing up another display. When we try to build this using only human technology, it doesn't work. When we try to build it using only Zephyrian technology, it doesn't work either. We need both. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. You're saying this technology requires cooperation between our species? That's exactly what I'm saying, Dr. Kim replied. The ancient civilization might have been made up of multiple species working together. Or, Liana said slowly, they designed it that way on purpose. They might have known that different species would develop different approaches to the same problems. The implications were staggering. If the ancient power cores required cooperation between species, then the galaxy's current system of isolated civilizations was working against technological progress. Species that worked together would have access to technology that none of them could achieve alone. We need to test this theory, Dr. Chun said. Let's build a prototype. The next week was the most intense period of Jake's life. He split his time between helping with the research and managing the increasing attention their work was attracting. Word had spread through the human colonies that something important was happening on New Terra, and ships from various research institutions had begun arriving in the system. Liana seemed to come alive during this period. She worked 18-hour days, barely stopping to eat or sleep. Her excitement was infectious, and even the most skeptical scientists began to believe that they were on the verge of a major breakthrough. Jake, she said one evening as they sat in their temporary quarters, I never imagined that my research would lead to something like this. Neither did I, Jake replied. When I accepted your father's proposal, I thought I was just trying to help someone who had been treated unfairly. You were, she said softly. But you were also changing the future of two civilizations. We're changing it, Jake corrected. This is your discovery, your research, I'm just helping. You're doing more than helping, Liana said. You're showing me what cooperation really means. On my world, science was about individual achievement and glory. Here, it's about working together to solve problems. Is that why your people didn't want you studying the ancient technology? Partly, she admitted. But also because they were afraid of what I might discover. They built their entire society on the belief that they were the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. If that turned out to be false, it would shake the foundations of their culture. The breakthrough came on the 10th day, Dr. Chun called. Everyone to the main laboratory, her voice tight with excitement. In the center of the room sat a device the size of a small refrigerator, covered in both human technology and Zephyrian crystals. We've successfully created a hybrid power core, she announced. The energy output is incredible. This single device could power a starship for years without refueling. The assembled scientists and technicians cheered, but Jake noticed that Liana looked worried. What's wrong? He asked her. This changes everything, she said quietly. When word of this gets out, every government in the galaxy will want this technology. That's good, isn't it? It could help everyone. It could, she agreed, but it will also threaten the balance of power. The hegemony, the Toraxian Empire, the Crystalline Collective, they all maintain their control by having superior technology. If smaller civilizations suddenly had access to power sources like this, it would change everything. Jake began to understand her concern. You think they'll try to stop us? I think they'll try to take the technology for themselves, she said. And if they can't do that, they'll try to destroy it. As if summoned by her words, Lieutenant Tom Brady appeared at Jake's side. Captain, we're receiving urgent communications from the orbital station. Multiple ships are approaching the system. They're not human vessels. Jake and Liana exchanged a look. Who are they? Jake asked. Unknown, sir. But they're requesting immediate access to the research facility. Dr. Chin had overheard the conversation. We need to protect this technology, she said. If it falls into the wrong hands, It won't, Jake said firmly. Liana, can you download all the research data onto portable storage? Already done, she replied, holding up a small crystal device. I've been backing up everything we've discovered. Good, Tom. Get word to the USS Endeavor. Tell them to prepare for immediate departure if necessary. Yes, sir. As the alien ships drew closer to New Terra, Jake realized that their peaceful research project had suddenly become something much more dangerous. The hybrid power core represented a new kind of technology that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. And there were civilizations out there who would do anything to control it. Liana, he said, taking her hand, whatever happens, we're in this together. She squeezed his hand. Together, she agreed. Neither of them knew that their work had already been noticed by the most powerful military alliance in the galaxy. The hegemony had been watching human expansion with growing concern, and the news of human Zephyrian cooperation had triggered their worst fears. A fleet was already on its way to New Terra, with orders to prevent this new technology from spreading. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from conquest, but from cooperation, and sometimes those discoveries are worth fighting for. The alien ships appeared at the edge of the New Terra system like dark clouds gathering before a storm. Jake stood on the bridge of the USS Endeavor, watching the tactical display as more and more vessels dropped out of hyperspace. The computer counted 30 ships, then 50, then over 100. Captain, Lieutenant Tom Brady called from the communications station, we're receiving a transmission from the lead vessel. They're identifying themselves as the Hegemony Fleet under the command of Admiral Kren of the Toraxian Empire. Jake had heard of Admiral Kren. The Toraxian was known throughout the galaxy as a ruthless military commander who had crushed a dozen rebellions and conquered twice as many worlds. If the Hegemony had sent him, they were serious about stopping the hybrid technology. Put him through, Jake ordered. The main screen flickered and showed the bridge of a massive Toraxian warship. Admiral Kren filled most of the display, his reptilian features twisted in what might have been a smile. His skin was dark green and covered in scales, and his eyes were the color of burning coals. When he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding stone. Captain Morrison of the human vessel, Admiral Kren said, I am here to collect the illegal technology you have developed. Surrender immediately, and your people will not be harmed. Illegal? Jake replied, keeping his voice steady. We're conducting peaceful research. We haven't broken any galactic laws. Admiral Kren's laugh was a harsh sound that made several crew members wince. You have created weapons that threaten the stability of civilized space. This cannot be allowed to continue. We've created power sources, not weapons, Jake said. Power is a weapon, human. In the wrong hands, it can destroy the order that has kept peace in the galaxy for centuries. Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was watching him, waiting for orders. In the corner, Liana stood quietly, her face pale but determined. She had insisted on being present for the confrontation, even though Jake had wanted her to stay in the safety of the research station. Admiral, Jake said, I cannot surrender technology that belongs to both human and Zephyrian civilizations. If the hegemony wants to discuss this, they can send diplomats. Diplomats are for equals, Admiral Kren snarled. You are primitive. Creatures playing with forces you do not understand. Stand down or be destroyed. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Jake turned to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Ben Rogers. How many ships do we have in the system? 12 human vessels, sir. 7 are research ships with minimal weapons. The other 5 are escort frigates like ourselves. Jake did quick math in his head. 12 ships against over 100. The odds were impossible, but he couldn't let the hegemony take the hybrid technology. If they controlled it, they would use it to tighten their grip on the galaxy even further. Tom, send a message to all human ships, Jake ordered. Tell them to prepare for combat, but do not engage unless fired upon. Sir, Commander Lisa Harper said quietly, we can't win this fight. I know, Jake replied, but we can't run either. If we let them take this technology, it will set back human development by centuries. Captain, Liana said, stepping forward. There might be another way. Jake turned to look at his wife. What do you mean? While we were working on the hybrid power core, I sent a message to my brother, Prince Darius. I told him what we had discovered and asked him to bring the information to sympathetic members of the Zephyrian government. You think they'll send help? I don't know, Liana admitted. But Prince Darius believed in my research even when our father cast me out. If anyone would convince the Zephyrian fleet to assist us, it would be him. Before Jake could respond, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. A dozen Zephyrian warships dropped out of hyperspace on the far side of the system. Their crystalline hulls gleamed like jewels against the darkness of space. Incoming transmission, Tom announced. It's from the lead Zephyrian vessel. The screen showed Prince Darius standing on the bridge of a Zephyrian cruiser. He looked like an older version of Liana, with the same intelligent eyes and determined expression. Sister, Prince Darius said, I received your message. The technology you have developed is too important to fall into hegemony hands. Darius, Liana replied, relief clear in her voice. Thank you for coming. Several members of our government agree that this hybrid technology represents the future of galactic civilization, Prince Darius continued. We cannot allow the hegemony to suppress it. Admiral Kren's voice crackled over the communications system. Prince Darius, you are making a grave mistake. The hegemony will not tolerate Zephyrian interference in this matter. Admiral Kren, Prince Darius replied calmly, the Zephyrian Empire does not take orders from the hegemony. We are here to protect our interests and those of our new human allies. Jake felt a surge of hope. With Zephyrian support, they might actually have a chance. But the odds were still heavily against them. All ships, Admiral Kren broadcast, prepare to engage. The humans and their Zephyrian allies will be destroyed unless they surrender immediately. Captain, Lieutenant Rogers reported, the hegemony fleet is moving into attack formation. Jake looked at the tactical display. Over 100 enemy ships were arranging themselves in a battle line that stretched across the system. The combined human and Zephyrian forces numbered only 24 vessels. All human ships, this is Captain Morrison, Jake announced over the fleet communications channel. Prepare to engage the enemy. Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for the future of free civilizations everywhere. Zephyrian ships, Prince Darius added. Coordinate with human vessels. Today we fight as one people. The battle began with a massive exchange of energy weapons fire. The hegemony ships opened fire first, sending streams of plasma and particle beams toward the smaller human and Zephyrian fleet. But Jake had positioned his ships carefully. Using the gravitational field of New Terra to help maneuver, the USS Endeavour had been equipped with one of the prototype hybrid power cores, and its enhanced energy output allowed the ship's weapons and shields to operate at levels far beyond normal capacity. Jake watched in amazement as his ship's phasers cut through enemy shields like they were made of paper. Target the lead Taraxian cruiser, Jake ordered. All weapons, full power. The Endeavour's enhanced weapons system struck Admiral Kren's flagship with devastating force. The enemy ship's shields collapsed instantly, and secondary explosions rippled along its hull. Impossible, Admiral Kren's voice came over the communications channel. How can a primitive human vessel generate such power? Around the system, other ships equipped with hybrid cores were having similar success. A human frigate destroyed 2 hegemony destroyers with a single volley. A Zephyrian cruiser punched through the defenses of an enemy battleship and left it drifting powerless. But the hegemony had numbers on their side. For every enemy ship destroyed, 2 more moved into position. Jake watched his tactical display with growing concern as human and Zephyrian vessels began taking damage. Captain, Commander Harper reported, the research vessel Newton is in trouble. She's lost main power and is under attack by 3 enemy ships. Ben, take us to assist the Newton. Jake ordered. The Endeavour raced across the battlefield, its hybrid power core allowing it to maintain maximum speed while keeping shields and weapons at full power. Jake's ship arrived just as the Newtons' remaining shields failed. "Fire everything we have," Jake commanded. The Endeavor's weapons struck all three enemy ships simultaneously. The enhanced energy output of the hybrid core allowed the ship to maintain a rate of fire that would have been impossible with conventional power systems. All three hegemony vessels were destroyed within seconds. "This is Admiral Kren to all hegemony ships," came the furious transmission. "Focus all fire on the human flagship. That vessel must be destroyed." Suddenly, the USS Endeavor found itself the target of dozens of enemy ships. Energy beams and missile salvos converged on Jake's position from all directions. "Shields down to 60%, Lieutenant Rogers reported as the ship shook under the impact of enemy fire. "Liana," Jake called to his wife, "get to the escape." "Pods." "No," she replied firmly. "We're in this together, remember?" The battle raged around them as more and more enemy ships focused their fire on the Endeavor. But the hybrid power core held, providing enough energy to keep the shields operational even under the massive bombardment. "Captain," Tom announced, "I am receiving a transmission from the research station. Dr. Chun says they've finished installing hybrid cores in all the remaining human ships." Jake's heart leaped. If all their ships had the enhanced power systems, they might actually be able to turn the tide of the battle. "All ships, this is Morrison," he broadcast. "Activate your hybrid power cores and engage at will." What happened next would be remembered in military academies for generations. The human and Zephyrian fleet, now fully equipped with hybrid technology, tore through the hegemony forces like a sword through cloth. Ships that had been struggling to survive suddenly became unstoppable weapons of war. Admiral Kren's flagship tried to flee, but Prince Darius intercepted it with his cruiser. The Zephyrian weapons, enhanced by hybrid power cores, disabled the Toraxian vessel in a matter of minutes. "Admiral Kren," Jake broadcast to the defeated enemy commander, "this is Captain Morrison." 6 months after the Battle of New Terra, Jake Morrison stood in the Great Hall of the Zephyrian Royal Palace, but this time everything was different. The same crystal walls that had once echoed with mocking laughter now rang with celebration. King Valorian III sat on his floating throne, but his expression held pride instead of disdain. "Captain Morrison," the king said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall, "or should I say Admiral Morrison, the Zephyrian Empire formally, recognizes the Terran-Zephyrian Confederation and pledges our full support to this new alliance." Jake wore the uniform of his new rank, the gold stripes on his sleeves still feeling strange after so many years as a captain. Beside him stood Liana, no longer the disgraced princess but now respected throughout the galaxy as one of the most brilliant scientists of her generation. "Your Majesty," Jake replied, "humanity is honored to stand as equals with the Zephyrian Empire." The word "equal" sent a ripple of whispers through the assembled nobles. 6 months ago, they had considered humans to be primitive barbarians. Now those same nobles competed for the chance to work with human scientists and engineers. Prince Darius stepped forward from his position near the throne. He had been promoted to Fleet Admiral after his role in the Battle of New Terra, and his support for the human alliance had made him one of the most popular figures in Zephyrian society. "The success of our joint fleet operations has exceeded all expectations," Prince Darius announced. "Our combined forces now patrol 12 systems, and 3 new species have requested to join our confederation." It was true. Word of the victory over the hegemony had spread quickly through the galaxy. Species that had been oppressed by the larger powers saw hope in the human Zephyrian alliance. The bird-like Avrans had been the first to join, followed by the aquatic Delphians and the silicon-based crystallites. "And the research programs?" King Valorian asked. Dr. Amy Chun stepped forward. She had been appointed as the head of the new Confederation Science Council, overseeing joint research projects across multiple worlds. "The hybrid technology continues to exceed our projections, Your Majesty. We now have ships that can travel faster and farther than anything previously built. Our energy efficiency has improved by 400%. More importantly," Liana added, We've discovered 17 new applications for the ancient technology. Medical devices, agricultural systems, even terraforming equipment. Every month brings new breakthroughs. Jake smiled as he listened to his wife speak. Her transformation over the past months had been remarkable. The shy, disgraced princess had become a confident leader who commanded respect from scientists across the galaxy. She had been elected as the first director of Confederation research, a position that made her one of the most powerful people in known space. What of the hegemony? One of the nobles asked. The mood in the hall grew more serious. The hegemony had not taken their defeat well. Admiral Kren had been executed for his failure, but his replacement, Admiral Vex, was proving to be even more dangerous. Reports suggested that the hegemony was building new weapons designed specifically to counter hybrid technology. They remain a threat, Jake admitted, but they're no longer the dominant force they once were. 3 of their member species have withdrawn from the alliance, and their military recruitment is down by 60%. Fear, Prince Darius said simply. They ruled through fear and superior technology. Now that other species see they can be beaten, the hegemony's power is crumbling. King Valorian nodded slowly. And what of the future? What are the next steps for our confederation? Jake and Liana exchanged a look. They had spent many nights discussing this very question. The confederation was growing rapidly, but growth brought new challenges. We need to establish a formal government structure, Jake said. Right now, we're operating through informal agreements and personal relationships. That works for a small alliance, but not for a confederation of 7 species across 23 worlds. We also need to focus on education and cultural exchange, Liana added. The technology is only part of what makes our alliance strong. The real power comes from different species learning to work together. Speaking of working together, Dr. Chun interjected with a smile, I have an announcement to make. She gestured toward the back of the hall where a group of young people entered. They were clearly from different species, humans, Zephyrians, Avrans, and others, but they moved together with easy familiarity. These are the first graduates of the Confederation Academy, Dr. Chun announced. Young people from all our member species who have spent the last 6 months learning together, studying together, and building friendships that will last their entire lives. Jake felt a surge of emotion as he watched the young graduates. Among them, he spotted a human girl talking animatedly with a young Zephyrian, their conversation flowing between languages as if it were the most natural thing in the world. This is how we build lasting peace, Liana said softly, following his gaze. Not through treaties or trade agreements, but through people who grow up seeing each other as friends instead of aliens. After the ceremony, Jake and Liana found themselves alone in the palace gardens. The crystal trees tinkled softly in the breeze, their crystalline leaves creating patterns of light and shadow on the pathways. It was here that they had first talked privately, when she was still a disgraced princess and he was just a human captain trying to navigate alien politics. Do you ever think about that first day? Liana asked, as if reading his thoughts. Every day, Jake replied. When your father made his offer, I thought I was just trying to help someone who had been treated unfairly. And now? Jake looked out over the gardens where fountains of liquid light flowed between beds of singing flowers. In the distance, he could see human and Zephyrian children playing together, their laughter mixing with the musical sounds of the alien garden. Now I think we changed the galaxy, he said. We? Liana asked with a teasing smile. All right, you changed the galaxy. I just provided transportation, she laughed and took his hand. We did it together. That's what made it work. They walked in. Comfortable silence for a while, passing monuments that told the story of their people's growing alliance. There was a crystal sculpture commemorating the Battle of New Terra, and a fountain dedicated to the first successful hybrid power core test. Jake, Liana said eventually, there's something I need to tell you. He stopped walking and turned to face her. Her expression was serious, but he could see excitement dancing in her dark eyes. What is it? The medical team ran some tests last week, she said, her voice soft but clear. We're going to have a baby. Jake felt the world stop for a moment. A baby, a child who would be both human and Zephyrian, a living symbol of everything they had built together. Are you sure? He asked. Very sure, Dr. Martinez says. Everything looks normal, despite the genetic differences between our species. Jake swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed. When he set her down, he saw tears of joy in her eyes. Our child will grow up in a galaxy where cooperation is normal, he said wonderfully. Where different species working together isn't unusual, it's just the way things are. A galaxy where being different is seen as an advantage instead of a weakness. Liana added. As they stood together in the alien garden, surrounded by the evidence of their success, Jake thought about the journey that had brought them here. It had started with laughter, cruel, mocking laughter from nobles who thought they were witnessing the ultimate humiliation, but the laughter had been wrong. What they had witnessed was not humiliation, but the beginning of a new age. An age where the barriers between species could be overcome through understanding, respect, and love. 6 months later, when their daughter was born, she would be the first child of the Terran-Zephyrian Confederation. Her birth would be celebrated across 7 species and 23 worlds. She would grow up speaking multiple languages, learning from teachers of different species, and playing with friends whose forms of life were as varied as the stars themselves. The nobles who had once laughed at King Valorian's offer would tell a different story to their own children. They would speak of the day their king made the most brilliant political decision in Zephyrian history. They would tell of the human captain who saw worth where others saw shame, and the princess who used her disgrace to change the galaxy. But Jake and Liana would tell their daughter the simplest truth of all, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is see the value in someone that everyone else has overlooked. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that someone will see the same value in you. The galaxy had learned that humans were not primitive barbarians, but partners worth having. And humanity had learned that being underestimated could be the greatest gift of all, because it meant that when you finally showed your true strength, the whole universe would be watching in amazement.